picture this. It's graduation season right now, and the class of 2026 is stepping out into what might be, honestly, one of the strangest labor markets we have seen in modern history.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly contradictory right now.
Right, because on one hand, entry-level hiring has visibly slowed down. But on the other hand, paradoxically, thanks to generative AI application tools, it has never been easier to just fire off a resume.
Yeah, the friction of applying is just entirely gone on the job seeker's end.
Exactly. I mean, companies are seeing nearly 3 times as many applications for entry-level positions right now as they did back in 2022. It's a massive flood.
3 times, yeah, which means the friction on the employer's end has just skyrocketed to compensate.
And because of that flood, organizations are fundamentally changing how they decide who gets an interview. So today, we have a stack of really timely sources for our deep dive into this, centered around a landmark new study from Stanford HAI.
Right, that's the Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. And we're also looking at some economic research from the Digital Economy Lab.
Yeah, so our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the black box of algorithmic hiring. Explore the invisible mechanisms these systems use to make decisions.
And, crucially, to confront the urgent AI governance questions that this reality forces on policymakers.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to set the stage here. If you are listening to this right now, and you're currently navigating the job market, understanding these invisible gatekeepers isn't just theory.
No, not at all.
It's a critical reality of your career path. So let's talk about the scale of this shift, because you mentioned how HR departments are handling the volume.
Right. To manage this sheer volume, human resources departments are deploying automated screening tools at an unprecedented scale. I mean, we're looking at a landscape where 90% of U.S. employers now use AI tools.
Wait, 90%?
Yeah, 90%. They use them to sort, rank, and filter job seekers before a human being ever even sees a single credential.
That is wild.
We are rapidly transitioning from a world where, a human hiring manager skims your resume to a world where a machine learning model decides if a human is even allowed to know you exist.
The scale of that is just staggering. But the Stanford study reveals a structural detail that completely changes the stakes here.
Yeah, it really does.
Because those 90% of employers, they are not building their own independent in-house AI systems, right? The vast majority rely on the exact same handful of third-party vendors.
Exactly. And the researchers tracked a massive data set to prove this. They looked at 3.4 million individual people submitting 4 million job applications.
4 million, just a massive sample size.
Huge. And this was to 1,700 different job postings, covering 150 different employers spread across 11 distinct industry sectors.
But the kicker is,
But every single one of those 4 million applications was assessed by an AI tool built by one single third-party vendor.
one vendor. I mean, it is essentially outsourcing the entire top of the hiring funnel to a single arbiter. It's like, think of a nightclub bouncer.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Right. It's not just that one club has a really tough bouncer. It's that the exact same cloned bouncer is working the door at 90% of the clubs in the city.
What's fascinating here is the governance implication of that market concentration.
Right, because it's everywhere.
Exactly. When you have one single algorithm influencing this many employers across 11 different sectors, it ceases to be just, a convenient HR software tool for one specific company.
Right. It becomes something much bigger.
It functionally becomes a piece of critical economic infrastructure. And when critical infrastructure harbors a systemic flaw, the damage reverberates through the entire labor market.
Yeah, because if this infrastructure is deciding the economic fate of millions of people, we really need to know how it actually makes those decisions.
We do. And that's what the Stanford researchers looked at. They specifically measured the system for bias.
Right, using the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's 4/5 rule under Title VII, right?
Yeah, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. They applied that specific legal standard because it is the defining metric for adverse impact in U.S. employment law.
So how does that rule actually work in practice?
Well, the 4/5 rule essentially mandates that if a hiring system recommends the most favored demographic group at a certain rate, it must recommend other demographic groups at a rate of at least 80% of that favored group.
Okay, so a 4/5 ratio.
Exactly. If the recommendation rate for any group falls below that 80% threshold, the system is legally flagged for creating an adverse impact.
And when the Stanford team ran that diagnostic across the 4 million applications processed by this single vendor, The numbers were pretty alarming.
They were. They found that 26% of Black applicants and 15% of Asian applicants were applying to positions where the AI system actively discriminated against them based on that 4/5 standard.
Just massive numbers of people. I mean, the study calculated that if the algorithm had simply recommended Black and Asian candidates at the identical rate, it recommended the most favored group.
Which is typically white applicants in these data sets, yeah.
Right. If they were treated identically, 40,000 more of their applications would have advanced to the human review stage.
40,000 highly qualified individuals systemically locked out.
That's heartbreaking. So how does this actually happen? Because the AI doesn't know someone's race, does it?
Well, to understand why this happens, we have to look at the mechanism of machine learning itself. These AI systems, they do not have a line of code instructing them to be biased against a specific race.
Right. It's not a cartoon villain programming in racism.
Exactly. They are pattern matching engines. They are trained on millions of historical resumes and past hiring decisions.
Okay, so they learn from what humans did in the past.
Right. And if the historical data reflects past human hiring managers who implicitly favored certain demographics, the AI learns to replicate that preference by indexing on proxy variables.
Proxy variables.
Yeah.
Okay, so the AI isn't explicitly looking at a demographic checkbox.
No, definitely not.
It's looking at, like, the vocabulary someone uses to describe their leadership experience, right? Or their zip code, or maybe a specific university affiliation.
Yes, exactly. It finds these subtle patterns.
And it realizes that historically, candidates with those specific, seemingly neutral markers were rejected by human managers.
Yeah, so it mathematically encodes historical human bias into a hyper-efficient algorithmic rule.
Wow. It just scales human flaws.
That is the core danger of the black box. It creates a mathematical laundering of historical discrimination.
Mathematical laundering. That is a great way to put it.
The vendor can claim the system is neutral, because they say it only looks at skills and experience, but the underlying mechanism is heavily weighting proxies that correlate strongly with race or gender.
Which raises an important question for regulators. How do you prove this bias exists when the vendor insists their overall system is totally fair?
Which brings us to the vendor's defense mechanism, right? Something the researchers call the illusion of pooling.
The illusion of pooling. Let me see if I have the mechanism right here, because it sounds like a massive statistical sleight of hand.
Oh, it absolutely is.
So, wait, if a regulator audits the vendor can just point to their entire platform average across all 150 employers,
Yeah.
right? And all 11 industries.
Right. And averaged out, the numbers look perfectly compliant.
So is this basically an accounting trick? Like, imagine a school principal telling a parent, your child has a solid C average, everything is fine, while completely hiding the fact that the student is getting an A+ in recess, but entirely failing math.
The grading analogy is spot on. By pooling all the data, the vendor masks severe discrimination occurring at the micro level.
Right, the details get lost in the average.
Exactly. The AI tool might heavily favor Black applicants for warehouse or logistics roles, but then systemically reject them for corporate finance or management roles.
Oh, wow.
So when you blend the data from the warehouse application and the finance applications into one giant aggregate spreadsheet, those two opposite biases mathematically neutralize each other.
So the overall average looks clean, but the reality on the ground is highly discriminatory.
Exactly. And from an AI governance perspective, the illusion of pooling is a massive regulatory blind spot.
Because policymakers are looking at the wrong numbers.
Right. Policymakers and auditors generally look for high-level compliance. But the Stanford findings prove that evaluating adverse impact cannot be done at the platform or vendor level.
It has to be granular.
Yes, it must be executed on a position-by-position, role-by-role basis, allowing massive AI vendors to hide behind aggregate averages, essentially neutralizes existing employment law.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, because discovering bias in a specific finance job is one thing, right?
Sure.
But as an applicant, you aren't just sending out a single resume, you are sending out dozens. And if the majority of the companies you're applying to are using this identical flawed infrastructure, the problem just mathematically compounds against you.
It does. The researchers define this compounding effect as an algorithmic monoculture.
Algorithmic monoculture.
Yeah, we borrowed the term from agriculture, where planting the exact same crop variation across thousands of acres makes the entire ecosystem incredibly fragile to a single pathogen.
Right. One disease can wipe out the whole farm.
Exactly. In the labor market, an algorithmic monoculture occurs when numerous independent employers all rely on the exact exact same algorithmic model to screen their candidates.
And the study actually measured the impact of this monoculture on the individual job seeker, didn't it?
They did. They found that if you submit 4 applications to different positions and all 4 are screened by the same vendor's algorithm, 10% of applicants are rejected from every single position they apply to.
Wait, 10%.
10%. And it's completely driven by the shared algorithmic assessment.
It's like having a terrible invisible credit score. It just follows you everywhere you apply, shutting you out systematically, but you have no idea what the score is or how to fix it.
That's exactly what it is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the algorithmic monoculture fundamentally breaks the mathematical assumptions of a free labor market.
Let's elevate that concept, actually, because the assumption of independence is crucial.
It really is. Historically, the job market relied on statistical independence.
Right. In a pre-AI world, getting rejected by company A had absolutely zero causal relationship to your chances at company B.
Yeah.
They were completely isolated variables.
Exactly. You might have had a resume format that one human recruiter just hated, but the human recruiter at the firm next door might have loved your experience.
Your chances reset with every single application.
Yeah. And to prove how thoroughly that independence has been destroyed, the Stanford team compared their findings to the largest prior baseline study of hiring outcomes.
Okay, what was the baseline?
Well, it analyzed 83,000 applications sent to Fortune 500 firms before the widespread adoption of these shared AI vendors.
Oh, so a good historical comparison.
Right. And in that baseline study, the rate at which an applicant was rejected from multiple firms aligned perfectly with natural statistical probability. Rejections were independent events.
But today, in the algorithmic monoculture, the rejections are correlated.
Exactly. A single flaw in how this one vendor's model parses your specific resume doesn't just cost you one job, it acts as a systemic blacklist.
A systemic blacklist. It creates this invisible, unappealable rejection score that follows you across the entire economy. Like I said, it is like having a decimated financial credit score that instantly disqualifies you for a mortgage, a car loan, an apartment.
Yeah, but it's worse in a way.
Right. Because unlike a financial credit score where you have a legally protected right to view your file and dispute errors, this algorithmic score is entirely hidden. You have no idea what it is, how the machine calculated it, or even how to begin fixing it.
The death of statistical independence in hiring is perhaps the most profound economic shift detailed in the study. When you are systematically shut out of an entire industry by a centralized gatekeeper, you can't even see, well, it completely changes the conversation policymakers need to be having regarding AI's impact on the workforce.
So what does this all mean? Like, if these opaque systems are creating universal blacklists, it radically shifts the entire AI policy debate, doesn't it?
It really does.
We aren't just talking about abstract job displacement anymore. How can policymakers realistically govern a black box that is dictating labor access at this massive scale?
Well, the Stanford researchers argue that AI screening tools bring together 3 properties that are exceptionally dangerous for public policy when combined.
Okay, what are the 3?
First, they are pervasively adopted.
Huh.
Second, they are highly consequential. I mean, they dictate economic survival.
Right, getting the job is survival.
And third, they are completely opaque. They're protected by corporate trade secrecy and, really complex machine learning architecture.
So you can't just look under the hood.
Exactly. Governing a system with those 3 traits requires moving way beyond voluntary vendor self-reporting.
And the central takeaway from Stanford HAI is the desperate need for independent third-party research to drive evidence-based AI policy. We cannot just rely on the vendors to grade their own homework.
Absolutely not, especially given the pooling loopholes we just discussed.
Right. But looking at the broader economic context provided in our sources, it seems like state policymakers are fearfully divided on how forcefully to intervene here.
They are. The division really stems from competing philosophies about AI's ultimate role in corporate efficiency.
Right. So we have James Landay, the director at HAI, who points out that major technological shifts historically drive massive productivity growth.
Yeah, and because of that historical precedent, many policymakers are hesitant to overregulate AI hiring tools. They view them as part of that necessary productivity leap.
They don't want to stifle innovation.
Exactly.
Yet on the other side of that debate, you have Eric Brynjolfsson, the director of the Stanford Digital Economy Lab. And he points out a pretty dangerous prevailing fallacy among corporate executives right now.
Yeah, Brynjolfsson argues that too many leaders view AI exclusively as a mechanism to slash labor costs.
Meaning they use it to automate the hiring and firing pipeline just to facilitate leaner operations and mass layoffs.
Right, and Brynjolfsson's counterargument is vital for the governance debate. He insists that businesses will ultimately realize much larger economic gains if they deploy AI to augment the productivity of their existing workforce, rather than just treating the technology as a cheap replacement for human judgment.
That makes a lot of sense. So when a company uses an AI monoculture to blindly filter out applicants just to save on HR costs, they are basically engaging in cost-cutting, not true productivity enhancement.
Exactly. But the question is,
Are corporations actually internalizing that distinction, though? Because the current landscape shows companies rushing to adopt these tools simply to cut overhead, and they are running far ahead of any regulatory framework.
yeah, they are. And the technology isn't standing still while we debate this either.
No, it's moving incredibly fast.
The market is already shifting from static sorting algorithms to highly complex generative language models and autonomous AI agents.
But those aren't perfect either. Because, as another Stanford piece recently highlighted, some of these shiny new AI coding agents are actually failing miserably when tasked with simple teamwork.
Yes, they found that two AI models working together often performed worse than a single model working alone.
Which is just crazy. I mean, the fragility of those newer agents underscores exactly why rushing to hand the keys of the economy over to opaque AI is so hazardous.
It really is. You have a labor market rapidly adopting infrastructure that is, in many proven ways, mathematically flawed and highly experimental.
So where does governance fit in?
Well, governance here isn't about stifling innovation or banning AI. It is about demanding rigorous, independent audits. Policymakers must enforce position-by-position testing to break the illusion of pooling.
Right, no more hiding behind the averages.
Exactly. And they must ensure that AI is deployed to augment human potential rather than systemically and invisibly discarding it.
Okay, let's bring this all together. If you are out there listening and you are sending a meticulously crafted batch of applications into the digital void and you hear absolutely nothing back, take a deep breath.
Yeah, don't panic.
It might not be a reflection of your skills, your education, or the way you phrased your cover letter. You might simply be running headfirst into the invisible wall of an algorithmic monoculture that has incorrectly indexed some proxy variable on your resume.
Recognizing it as a systemic infrastructural flaw rather than a personal failing is just crucial. I mean, the architecture of the labor market itself is filtering you out before human eyes ever get the chance to evaluate your actual potential.
Exactly. It's the system, not you. But I want to leave you with one final, slightly surreal thought to mull over that builds on everything we've discussed today.
Well, let's hear it.
So if 90% of companies are using AI to read resumes, sort candidates, and act as the ultimate gatekeeper,
Right.
and we know that job seekers are increasingly utilizing their own AI tools to write, optimize, and mass submit those applications,
Yeah, that's becoming huge.
are we rapidly approaching a near future where the job market is just AI applicant bots endlessly negotiating with AI hiring bots?
Oh, wow. Just machines talking to machines.
Exactly. And if that closed loop becomes the new reality, where does human governance even begin to step in to pry the doors back open? It really makes you wonder, if that cloned algorithmic gatekeeper is just talking to a cloned algorithmic applicant who was actually left inside the building.